Damn, I haven't cussed that much in this whole fucking video. That's crazy. I'm gonna put that probably in the intro though, so. Yo, what's good? So basically today we're gonna be talking about my export settings for videos. Let's get into it. So sequence settings, you wanna put 1842 width by 2304 height, I think. If not, then it's flipped, but pretty sure it should be the first one. Yeah, it's gonna be a 4:5 ratio, which is the most you can get off Instagram. It's better than 1:1 to me, just because you get more real estate. And then obviously it fills up the page a lot more better than like a 16:9. You're probably looking at these numbers and these settings, and they're actually kind of like in a 2K kind of resolution versus like your normal 4:5. I think that normal one is like 1305 by I think almost 2000 or maybe less than 2000. I don't know. It's the same format. It's basically like just a little bit bigger, right? Like in terms of resolution. So you're basically upscaling almost like to a 2K image. When you upload to Instagram, you're basically kind of downscaling that 2K image to like their standards, because I think theirs is like 1305 or something like that by whatever. And so that's also kind of helps you get a crispier image, because you're kind of, it's already, you know, a lot of people kind of fail where they export exactly to what Instagram wants, and then they kind of compress it anyway. So it even turns out more worse, right? It turns out more worse. Turns out even more worse. Yeah. And then some people go to the extreme where they export like a huge like 8K file, and then you know they think it's gonna like downscale and Instagram's gonna make it like compress it and make it super nice. It's not. It's gonna make it even worse. So you only want to push like the envelope of that just a little bit, you know. And you'll recognize that in my photos too. I'll talk about that a little bit in there as well. The concept is basically like if you're shooting footage in 4K but editing in a 1080 timeline, you obviously downscale that 4K footage. That way when you export that 4K footage, you're basically like compressing it down to that 1080. So it just gives a little bit more crisper image and just a little bit more information to that footage, you know what I mean? So that's pretty much the same idea with this IG setting. And then yeah, basically when you get that, depending on your footage, if it's like 1080 footage, what am I saying? Depending on your footage, if it's 1080 footage like mine usually is, you're just gonna have to upscale it. Even if you shoot it in vertical, you're still gonna have to upscale it a little bit. But if you shoot it horizontally, you're just gonna have to shift the position sometime, depending, because sometimes you're not gonna be shooting everything specifically centered. Sometimes it works out that way where you just place it and everything sort of just aligns and fits. Be wary though, like with like text and things like that on the final video. If you're trying to compensate for, let's say, the person to be in the center, like depending where you put your text, the text could be off. So you just have to be wary on that to make sure it's actually like centered in Premiere. For me, most of the time I'll just edit my 1920 by 1080 sequence first, and then I'll make another sequence in that 4:5 ratio, and then I'll upload just that sequence bar, not all like the clips and audio layers and all that stuff. It'll be just bunched up. Then I'll put my keyframes or scaling and all that stuff into the actual 4:5 one, and then that's what I export out to Instagram. So the export settings for Instagram, I always click match source, because sometimes it still thinks it's 1920 by 1080. So I just make sure that's clicked so I can switch to the whole thing. I don't mess with like none of the levels and all that kind of like those little other things under there. I do check render at maximum depth and render at maximum quality or whatever it is. Sometimes I'll click use previews if I render previewed it. I heard it's supposed to be faster, or it helps you export it faster. The bitrate settings are super important. This is where I think a lot of people are just doing it wrong or not knowing or whatever. So I use VBR 2-pass, and usually I put a target bitrate around 10 to 15, depending on length of the video. Like if it's a 5-minute video, like, you know what I mean? It's gonna be like 800 megabits to a gig almost, you know what I mean? Depending on what it is. If it's like 10-minute, 15-minute, like over a gig for sure, or like 1,000 megabits or whatever. If it's like, 10-second clip, but there's like a lot of going on in it, I'll bring up a target as much as I can where I know like my internet and speed, like where it's worth it, for the internet speed. Usually my targets is always like, just depends, but I always try to keep it under like 100 to 100. If it's like a really short, like 30-second to a minute, like I'll keep it under like 130 megabits for sure for like a minute video. Again, it just really depends how many layers and stuff you have and like how fast your internet is, etc. But for me, that's what I do. And then basically the maximum bitrate, I always set it to the most. And then basically that 2-pass is basically when you export it, it runs through it once and then it runs through it again. And so for me, in my head and mentally, what I'm thinking is like when you're pouring champagne in a bunch of glasses and you go, this is a weird like thing, but whatever. This is what I just I thought of. Like you're pouring a bunch of champagne in glasses, and you're trying to like level them all up like to a good decent point, and then you pop like one more open because you have a few more glasses left, and then you look at some of the other glasses and some are more full than others. That's pretty much how I think about it with the VBR 2-pass. It's like running through, and then it's like giving each frame like the information to make it like high quality, etc. And then it runs through it again, and it's kind kind of like finalizing that. VBR pass 1, basically the same thing, but it's just one pass. It's variable, so it's like going through 20 through 100 or whatever, and it goes through that. Constant bitrate is constant, basically, so if you set it at 30, it's gonna give each frame like 30. But here's the thing, sometimes a certain frame either needs more or needs less, and you're basically just kind of like giving either too much or too little. So the variable bitrate is kind of really where you want to go. I think personally, I don't know, that's from the information that I've kind of gathered. Again though, I might be wrong. And then yeah, pretty much I hit export, I let that run, and then I'll upload it to my Dropbox, then I'll save it to my phone, and then upload it through to Instagram directly, like that. If you have a MacBook or something like that, you can like airdrop it to yourself. That's pretty sweet too. I don't have that, I run on Windows, but I do have an iPhone, so you know, don't laugh at me, but yeah. That's pretty much it. Export settings are important, but it also goes into you know, your shots that you're getting with your camera and how cinematic and the color grading and all those things, all those elements that go into it. But yeah, export settings are definitely important, and a lot of people can definitely mess them up. And those are mine for specifically for Instagram, but pretty much everything that I checked below, other than like the match source, I pretty much check match source for anything from if I'm exporting something in 4K or 1080 for YouTube or Instagram or Insta Reel or TikTok, whatever it is. All the other like VBR and all that stuff is pretty much the same for everything going forward. Just because all my stuff kind of runs through it twice, regardless of what it is. Even if it's a 10-second TikTok or reel, still upload it or export it the same way, just because again, I feel like it retains that information and it just has that quality in it, and I want to keep that as much as I can, regardless of what I'm shooting on or what it's for. If you guys like this video, man, please let me know in the comments below what you want to see more of. You know, what do you want me to talk about next or explain next? Follow me on Instagram, you can see a lot of my work on there. Tag should be somewhere, everywhere, in the description as well. But yeah, like the video, comment if you want, whatever, I don't really care. Make sure you check out my other video. It's the export settings to Lightroom. So basically my export settings for photos only. Pretty much kind of like a similar thing, but appreciate you guys. I love you.